true history of the Kelly gang has just been released digitally. It stars George McKay, Essie Davis, Nicholas Hoult, Charlie Hunnam, and Russell Crowe. Despite what the title may suggest, it's a highly fictionalized retelling of the real life story of Ned Kelly and his gang, the last bushrangers of the late 19th century Australia, people who would rob banks and wage war with the authorities before finally being dismantled at the end of an era of lawlessness in Australia. To describe the film quickly, I would say you can think of it as a psychological western. It was directed by Justin Kurzel, who has previously done the 2015 version of Macbeth with Michael Fassbender, and you can immediately spot the similarities between the two films. They really are akin in style and the way they tell their stories. First and foremost, it's a highly visual type of storytelling, with cinematography being a way more important tool than simple dialogue. The scenery put to screen is both impressive and otherworldly. It kind of feels like a fairy tale. Not a children's fairy tale, but a Brothers Grimm one. A dark and adult fairy tale. At times, the film feels as if it's taking place in some sort of pocket reality, in its own little world, removed from the real one. It's like something you can imagine in a fever dream. Like in Macbeth, the score is also equally important to the cinematography and does a great job of setting the atmosphere. And also, like Macbeth, the story itself is very character driven. We see Ned Kelly through his entire life. The story is divided into three acts representing the distinct stages of his journey and titled appropriately The Boy, The Man, and The Monitor. And when you're going into a story about the famous Australian gang of outlaws, you may expect a lot of action, a lot of shooting, a lot of physical violence, but this film doesn't really concern itself with those things, instead being more interested in what created Ned Kelly, what made an innocent young boy into an insane menace to society. The way we see him progress down that path paints him as a product of his environment and circumstances, as someone who his entire life struggled to stay off the path that he ultimately found himself on. But then in the final moments, we do see him embrace that path, resign himself to it, and to the madness that comes with it. And yes, again, that also is very reminiscent of Macbeth's progression as a character in his play. I think that applying those principles and story beats to a more modern story, and one taking place in society so much different than medieval Scotland, is fascinating. It never really felt repetitive or boring. Despite the similarities to Macbeth, it manages to be its own thing. And what needs to be said is the performances are terrific across the board, with George McKay being the standout one. I think using him as a lead actor in a story that's both so much character driven and so focused on visuals feels almost like cheating, because that guy can tell a whole story with just his eyes. Having said all of that, I have to admit that it's a pretty difficult movie to digest, and as such, it's certainly not for everyone. Its storytelling is so much more introspective and lyrical than the regular audiences are used to, and I can see people, being turned off by it, not appreciating it as much. Even I wasn't particularly stunned by it when the movie finished. I thought it was good but not fantastic. But then, a day passed, and I find myself thinking about it still, and still seeing some of the frames from the movie in my mind. So it definitely stays with you. It leaves an impression, and that, I think, speaks to its merit as this introspective journey into what makes and what breaks a man. I'd say give it a chance if you like ambitious cinema, and if you enjoyed the 2015 Macbeth, you absolutely have to see this one as well.